And if we're going to go a little bit further, then what we're going to do is we're going to shade and wash our minis. I like to use Agrax Earth Shade. I think it gives a nice dirty-ish look, which really just shows that these guys have been in the field for a considerable length of time. So the important thing here is that you don't pool it, because that can really obscure some of the details and we'll get a chalky finish at the end. So we want to just have a really light shading, and we do not want to get it too much, too deep, but it will help to pick out some of those details, especially if you're like me, a little bit untidy with the different strappings and things like that. So we just do that, do front and back like normal. The next step then is, after the wash, is to add a little bit more depth and to pick out some of those colors. So we want to use a white color here just to pick out some of the details on the chest of the model. Don't forget the trousers as well. This will just really make the minis pop from a distance of about 2 feet, which is realistically how most people are going to see these. You could spend a lot of time really going in there for the details, but it's probably not going to be worth your while. So yeah, just get those all done and then on to the next step. So next we're going to want to pick out the armor, or sorry, the jackets. We're going to do that with a nice bright blue color, just to make those really pop. So I'm not being as neat with these as I would with my 28mm miniatures, because realistically you're not going to see a huge amount of detail on these anyway whenever you're actually wargaming. So it's not really worth your while to like spend tons and tons of time on these. Getting them to a playable standard is sufficient. So make sure you pick out those colors nice and bright. See you in the next step. The next step then is going to be to pick out the jackets with a nice brighter blue color. So in this case we're going to go with this one, and we're just going to paint that over the top of the jacket as it stands, being a little bit more careful than we have in the previous steps. Like I said, I don't really care so much about being very particular with 6mm figures. I just want them to be clearly distinguishable from the other armies on the battlefield, and that's really sufficient for me. Okay, don't forget also to do the back on there. Make sure to get the jackets painted, trying not to go over the detail from the previous steps too much, so you don't have to go back and do that again. Okay, see you in the next step. The next stage then is of course to highlight the skin tone. So just use a basic skin tone for that. And remember, this is a highlight, not a base coat of the skin tone, otherwise it's kind of a bit unnatural. But for some of the higher parts of the skin, it's not too bad. So just try to be a little bit neat with this step. Kind of just picking out some of the details. It can be a nose here, chin, and so on. Not the easiest thing to do. Just want to get pretty good like that. Okay. The next step then will be to do the stock of the barrel. So you'll need a nice bright brown for that, so a bit like a flat brown or whatever from Vallejo. It's quite nice. Just going to need to just sort of pick out the base a bit, the stock. Again, as always, trying to be quite neat with this. You don't have to go back over the other parts later on. The next step then is to pick out the red again, just using our flat red from Vallejo. Just getting those cuffs and various different other red parts picked out. So again, trying to be as careful as possible. Next we'll do a small highlight of the hat and also the boots using some basalt grey, you can see it there. So you really just want to be going over the tops of these hats a little bit, just to pick it out here and there. It doesn't need to be everything, just maybe the tops of the boots, just to make it pop a little bit. Because I mean, one of the things that makes 6mm figures really stand out is some eccentric highlights here and there. Makes them just pop that a little bit more. Of course you don't need to do this step. I just like to make sure that my miniatures pop a little bit so that they have a little bit more visual feel, just for my own personal desires. The last step then is to just go over the metal again and make it pop a little bit more. So again, that's with our Citadel color iron breaker. So most of the metal is just on the top of the bayonets. Some of that kind of really dulled down during the period where we washed the minis. So this is the last step in the advanced painting. We'll go over the basing, but for now the minis are more or less done. Don't forget, of course, to do the backs of the bayonets as well, and that will really help those pop quite a bit. Then you just come back for the next step, which will be basing. Okay, now that the minis are more or less complete, the next stage is to just do the bases. So I usually just paint the base of the strips using some flat earth, a little bit watered down to make sure it flows a little bit easier, and then just get a good even coverage on there. You want to be a little bit careful, but at the same time we're going to be putting some static grass on here. You might need to do a couple of coats just to make sure you get a good coverage of the brown, so that there's not really too much of the undercoat showing through, because brown can be a little bit opaque or sorry, like transparent, which can really affect the visual appeal. So the last step then is to put a little bit of static grass on there of the basing. So put a few dabs of Elmer's glue all on there, so, or any real PVA glue actually will do, just along the base, and then we'll go through and we'll stick some static grass on there just to give it a little bit of a pop. So you can see I'm dabbing on, not being too particular about where, just so long as I'm not on the minis. And then you're going to want to get your static grass and just put a few pinches here and there. Just dab it in and around. Okay, and then top off any excess. And there you have it. Some French infantry in a field. So here they are, all based up and ready to go and looking quite lovely. So thank you for watching, and make sure to check out the other videos on my channel. See you next time.